Hey guys, it's Barb, and this is my Artsnacks unboxing and review. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe to see more of these videos. Now let's check it out. If this is your first time watching an Artsnacks unboxing, this is the box that you get in the mail. And inside you'll find all of your items. Our first item is a Zebra Zensations fine tip pen. And it looks like there are two more, which is awesome. This one is a super fine and a medium as well. So far with these boxes, it's unusual to get three of the same type of item, so I'm curious to check these out later. Next up is the menu card. It details all of the items in the box, and this one even has a little indicator with the different pen nib types. The next item is an Graham Coe Watercolor in sap green. Our Artsnacks sticker. Our treat is a Crybaby Extreme Sour. And the last items will be in our green tissue here, which I've previously opened. We're going to check out our last two items that are inside the green tissue. If you do get an Artsnacks box, you can share your unboxing with Artsnacks on social media by using their hashtag or adding them on Instagram or Facebook. So our first item here in the tissue, it looks like a Princeton round brush, paintbrush. And lastly, there's the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer watercolor pencil, and it's the Magnus, which is the larger version compared to the original size. I'm going to start off my illustration with the Faber-Castell Magnus watercolor pencil. This has a great feel to it, even though it's a large size. It's a 5.3mm core, and it's 100% water soluble. So as you can see, you can use this in its dry form, but if you add water, it will completely dissolve as well. These pencils are really great for large areas because of their large size, and they actually are really great for doing watercolor-like effects. The only thing is that it will be permanent when it dries. You can't really rework it like you would watercolor, so that's something to keep in mind. In this case, I'm using it for the white areas on my panda bear illustration. It's going to give me some tone in the white fur area, just to give it a little bit more depth. For the next part of my illustration, I'm going to be using the Graham Coe Watercolor and the Princeton Synthetic Sable round brush. Fun fact about the Graham Coe Watercolor is that it's actually made with honey, and so what that'll do is it'll actually help with the longevity of the product. If you don't end up using it for a few years, it should still maintain its buttery and awesome consistency that you see here. And that's really great because I find with watercolor, unless you're an avid watercolorist, if you don't use them very often, you don't tend to need a lot with watercolor, and as you can see, it's quite saturated here. That being said, if you don't use it a lot, you don't want it to just dry out on you. Especially for this particular product, it is a decent price, and I would imagine depending on the color you buy, the price varies. So it's important to make sure that there's a longevity to it and that it's not just going to dry out on you if you don't use it for a couple months or even a couple years. And you can see with the brush here, I'm getting some really great fine lines and sharp detail, which is really nice to see in this brush. So as you can see here, I'm just going to do a light green wash in my background and fill in some of the area where my bamboo leaves are going to be. I'm going to do a different range of tones in this illustration, so I'm going to start with a lighter tone in the background and then gradually build up with different variations of green just to give it a little bit more depth in the area that it's sitting in. I'm just going in now and filling in, basically doing full saturation with this watercolor. I'm using it like I would an acrylic paint or a gouache. I'm not really watering it down at all here, just so you can see the full saturation of the color and what it looks like, and actually how well it performs just in that form as well without really watering it down at all. I'm really loving the performance of this Princeton brush as well. I have a relatively large collection of these small little brushes, so It's nice to see another one that I can add to my collection, and I will most likely use quite a bit after this project. But yeah, I really enjoy that it's holding its shape. It's very consistent and it feels great to hold, and none of the hairs are coming out of place or falling out, even worse. Princeton's actually becoming one of my favorite types of brushes, and for the most part they're usually pretty economical as well, so that's always an extra bonus. Just skipping ahead a little bit, you can see that I've created a variety of tones just using this single color. The color consistency is really great between all the different tones, which is always a nice indication of a high quality pigment. There's no chunks or weird patches of color. It's coming out really great no matter if it's watered down or the full saturated color, which is really nice to see. Our last product are the Zebra Zensation pens in fine, super fine, and medium. I love that we got the 3 different weights in this box, and I'm just going to do some swatch tests here just to test out what they're capable of before I use them on my drawing. These pens are really great because if you adjust the pressure that you use, it responds to that in terms of the weight of line that you get. It's kind of nice because in that sense, if you only really bought one, you would get a lot out of it. As you can see with the fine here, I'm getting quite a bit of versatility out of just the one pen in terms of weights, and then with the medium, of course, it's a bolder line, but you can actually do quite fine lines with it as well, which is really nice to see. We're going to use all 3 different pens in different areas. For these larger areas, I'm using the medium one. Obviously with the broader tip, it's going to be a little bit better to fill in larger areas. But I'm still getting a really great fine line just on the edges where I'm doing the little bits of the fur. Another thing to note that these markers are water resistant, not waterproof, which is why I'm using them last after I've done my watercolor work. I did find, however, in the process of doing this, that they actually are quite water resistant. Sometimes even when something says it's water resistant, it still will bleed quite a bit when it's wet. These actually did pretty good with not bleeding too much. And in fact, when they did, it was because they were still a little bit wet. So it's actually really nice. I still wouldn't recommend using a water-based product over top of them if you've used them first, but rest assured, if for some reason you make a mistake or you need to go back in with something after, they're relatively budge-proof, which is, in this experiment, it was nice to see that. Another thing I really loved about these pens was that they have really nice flexible nibs. If you're a little bit rough on your pens or sometimes a little heavy-handed, this is a great feature because you won't wreck the tips of them very easily. It's really nice, and again, I love that you can adjust your line weight based on the pressure that you use. If you're into hand lettering, this is a great pen to try out and potentially add to your collection of brush pens. Again, the flexible tip on it, I think, to me, is just a really great feature. For that reason, I will probably be using these pens quite a bit in the future as well. I'm just finishing up my illustration detail here with the super fine point pen. And again, even if I didn't have this pen, it's really nice that the other weights of the pen will also give you this type of line. Granted, it's a little bit easier with the super fine, but still nice to have that flexibility. I'm using the water resistancy to my advantage in this case by using some water and blending out a light gray tone from the areas that are still a little bit wet. If you like using mixed media in your illustrations and drawings, this is something to consider. Again, this is why I've done this as my last step, knowing that I wanted to add that in, but if it wasn't something you wanted and you, for whatever reason, needed to add some more water or an area that was using wet media, you would have to be very careful and mindful of the areas that you use this pen, because if you didn't want that bleed, then that would be a bad thing. In this case, I know that it's going to do that, so I've used it in areas that I want to have that extra gray tone. The last step is using the Magnus watercolor pencil in its dry form to add in some highlights in the black areas of my panda's fur. And here's the completed version of my illustration using all of the items in the September Artsnacks box. This was another really solid box from Artsnacks. I don't tend to have too many complaints with them to begin with, but I also feel like that's a really good sign that what they're sending is always really well curated and of really great quality. My only real complaint had to do with the color that I received of the Magnus watercolor pencil, and that's just because I feel like in this case, if you'd never tried this product before, it's not a really great indicator of what it's capable of. If you had tried one of the more saturated colors, you would definitely visually be able to see a lot more of what you can do with it and just the range that it has. Unfortunately, this light gray color just doesn't really show that as well as it could. But if you're curious about it, I would definitely recommend even trying the regular sized Albrecht Dürer watercolor pencils. You can get them in sets of 12, and I have a set of 12 and I love them, and they're so versatile and great for travel as well. I would definitely purchase more of every item that's in this box. I'm currently going to investigate where I can get more of these pens locally, as I know I'm probably going to wear them out very quickly. And the watercolor as well was really great, and my love for watercolor continues to grow the more of these products that I try, so it's really exciting, and I hope to see more of that in the future boxes. If you'd like to know more about Artsnacks, you can find them at artsnacks.co or here on YouTube. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll see you next time.